Amazing moment. Black Maid discovered hidden symptom that saved Millionaire's newborn in time. Ella stood in the pristine living room of the Harrison home, the scent of polished wood and fresh flowers wrapping around her like an invisible cloak. The extravagant chandeliers sparkled above her, illuminating the vast spaces that seemed to exist in a different world, a world miles away from the struggling upbringing she had fought to escape. She was a maid in this house, and the whispers of disdain from some neighbors often echoed in her mind. Yet, Ella was anchored by her dreams of becoming a doctor, a goal she chased while navigating the ever-present obstacles of prejudice and skepticism. Just then, as she changed the Harrisons' precious newborn, a wave of anxiety washed over her. Her clinical training kicked in as she spotted a developing rash on the delicate skin. It wasn't the same flush of color one would see from a harmless bout of baby eczema. This was serious. She immediately recalled her coursework about skin conditions in infants, the kind of knowledge that felt both empowering and devastating. With an extravagant party on the horizon, the thought of raising alarm felt like an impossible choice. Would they dismiss her concerns, seeing just a maid in front of them rather than someone driven by a greater purpose? Before she could collect her thoughts any further, laughter erupted from the kitchen where the Harrisons prepared for their grand gathering. Ella paused, torn between her responsibilities and the urgency nibbling at her conscience. How could she step beyond her designated role and speak up about a life that couldn't voice its own fear? The mere idea sent her heart racing. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The tension thickened as Ella stood frozen, the noise of the party fading into a distant hum. Mr. Harrison emerged, his polished demeanor like a wall she had always feared to touch. Just finishing up, he remarked, glancing at her but not truly seeing her. Her insides twisted painfully as she approached him, words crashing in her throat. Would they elevate her voice or silence it with their glances? Her lips parted, but she hesitated, suddenly aware of her stature, a mere maid conveying dread about their prized newborn. Yet, the image of that innocent face haunted her enough to push her forward. Sir, I believe the baby may need to see a doctor. I noticed a rash. His eyes narrowed, an annoyance flaring through his posture. Ella, we've got everything under control for tonight. This party is important. A muscle in her jaw clenched. The weight of dismissal ignited a spark she didn't know she had, pushing her to voice the seriousness looming over them. But sir, it might be a sign of something serious. Words came pouring out of her like an overflowing dam. She couldn't and wouldn't back down. As Mrs. Harrison entered, her gaze painted Ella with a mix of irritation and judgment. Ella, not now. We can't deal with this right before our celebration. The clock was ticking. The veil of normalcy over the evening was slipping, and Ella stood amid the chaos, her unshakable belief in her instincts battling against the deep-seated prejudices that cast shadows all around her. The room, once filled with laughter and cheer, swirled around in a relentless storm of doubt. Ella's heart thudded fiercely, a stark contrast to the elegant world ensconced in splendid decorations. Would this moment fracture the illusion of their glimmering lives? Would Mr. Harrison recognize her courage, or will he close the door on her, sending her back to the margins of their existence? In that touch-and-go instance, Ella knew that the stakes had never felt higher. Ella felt a rush of adrenaline as she faced Mr. Harrison, the weight of her words pressing on her tongue. The defiance swelling inside her was new and fierce, challenging the confines of her past and the expectations that came with her role. But would it be enough? Would her conviction translate into action, or simply become another whisper lost in the grandeur of the evening? Sir, she pressed on, her voice steady though her heart raced, please, I truly believe you should have a doctor look at her. It's not just a rash. It could be much more serious. His dismissive glance stung, but she held her ground. In that moment, something within her shifted. It wasn't just a matter of professional knowledge. It was a matter of responsibility. The child's life hung in the balance, oblivious to the social games played around her. Ella realized she could no longer shrink into the background of indifference. "Ella, we appreciate your concern," but Mr. Harrison began, but she cut him off, instinctively knowing that this was the defining moment. "No, sir, this isn't just about the event. This is about saving a life." The passion in her voice startled even her, igniting a spark of ultimate determination. A courage she'd long buried beneath self-doubt now surged to the surface. Ella barely registered the gasp from Mrs. Harrison. Her focus was laser-like on Mr. Harrison's face, watching for any flicker of acknowledgement. But all she saw was irritation mixed with confusion. "Please understand," she implored, "it's not my place to say this, but I have the training to recognize a potentially dangerous condition. You need to listen." In that charged moment, Ella was transforming, shifting from an invisible maid to a fierce advocate. She'd walked a tightrope for too long, balancing her ambitions against societal prejudices, and now it felt like chains were breaking. The seconds felt eternal as she gauged Mr. Harrison's response, the uncertainty gnawing at her insides. Then abruptly the atmosphere shifted. The laughter from the kitchen suddenly stopped, replaced by an eerie silence as an additional figure emerged, a maternal presence that felt far more authoritative. It was Mrs. Harrison's sister, Emma, a respected pediatrician. Recognizing Ella's urgency, Emma stilled the room with her commanding presence. "What seems to be the problem?" she inquired, her gaze flicking from Ella to the baby, Alicia, nestled in the crib. This was it, Ella thought, her breath catching in her throat. She had found a partner, an ally who understood the language of medicine. "There's a rash, and I'm concerned it may be symptomatic of something more," she explained, her voice infused with the urgency she had fought so hard to convey. Emma moved closer, examining the baby with a practiced eye. The tension in the air sharpened as the seconds turned into minutes. Ella's stomach twisted in knots as she watched. The potential fallout of her boldness raced through her mind. Had she put herself in further jeopardy, or had she finally claimed her autonomy? "Ella," Emma said evenly, but the warmth in her voice caught her off guard. "You did the right thing. Thank you for speaking up." The relief crashed over her like waves, but she was also filled with a new resolve. Each smile and nod felt like a small victory against the entrenched biases that had held her back. No longer invisible, Ella had asserted herself in a world that had tried to silence her. As the evening continued, Ella felt different. Renewed purpose thrummed in her veins. The Harrisons would never see her merely as their maid again. She'd be recognized for the knowledge she possessed. But what about the other barriers that still loomed? The confrontation that had next etched itself in her memory left lingering questions. Would her next move lead her closer to her dream? Or would the system once again push back hard? Answers lay ahead as she navigated through the complexities of her reality, a path lined with challenges that blurred the lines between who she was and who she aspired to be. With this shift in her perspective, Ella stepped out of the living room and into the hallway, determined to face whatever challenges came next, while also questioning her place in the tapestry of their world. In the distance, she could hear the faint sound of laughter, but now it felt different, echoing with possibilities she hadn't dared to imagine. Would she find the courage to continue this path of advocacy? Or would she retreat back into her former role, stripped of her newfound voice? The journey was only beginning. As Ella found her footing in the hallway, a whirlwind of emotions flooded her mind. The adrenaline from her confrontation still coursed through her, but beneath it lay an undercurrent of anxiety. She could feel the uncertainty pooling in her stomach. Had she truly shifted the narrative in her favor? Or was this merely a fleeting moment of bravery destined to fade under the weight of societal norms? Her thoughts darted as she reached the small staff break room, a space usually filled with the smell of coffee and baked goods. But rather than the comfort of familiar banter, a palpable tension hung in the air. The other staff members had assembled, each with eyes that sparkled with intrigue and disbelief, the kind sparked by daring acts of rebellion. Ella's heart raced as they shared whispers, point her way, visibly impressed by her unexpected assertiveness. "Did you see that?" one of the cooks said incredulously. Ella actually stood up to Mr. Harrison. Ella felt the weight of their gazes, a mix of admiration and caution. To them, she was more than just another maid. She had transcended her role, if only for a moment. Yet with that admiration came a reckoning. If she accepted this newfound perception, It meant embracing the responsibility that came with it. As she freshened her cup of coffee, her mind raced with possibilities. Each sip felt heavy, a ritual that grounded her yet lifted her spirit. There was a measurable shift within her, a sense of empowerment she hadn't anticipated. Emma's validation echoed in her mind. She had done more than merely perform her duties. She had spoken with authority, with purpose. But that empowerment was cloaked in risk. By challenging Mr. Harrison, she had thrust herself into a spotlight she had avoided for so long. What if the family, infuriated by her outburst, retaliated in ways she could not foresee? She struggled to balance her newfound voice with the fear of repercussions, knowing they lurked behind the polished facade of her workplace. Determined to keep this momentum, she began to envision her next steps. There was an internship opportunity at a local clinic, one that had seemed out of reach before but now stood within her grasp. If she committed herself to pursuing it, she could channel her advocacy into real change, not just for herself but potentially for others like Alicia. She could become a lifeline, making a difference where it was so desperately needed. Yet she hesitated. The path stretched before her, tempting yet daunting. How would she approach the clinic? Would anyone take her seriously, given her current position? Each doubt flickered like the shadows cast by the fluorescent lights above her. Just as she wrestled with the need to act, the door swung open and Emma entered, her presence immediately shifting the atmosphere. "There you are," she said, her expression warm yet determined. "Can we talk for a moment?" Ella nodded, her heart skipping a beat. The authority of Emma's presence felt invigorating, a reflection of the new choices that lay ahead. "I wanted to ask you about your plans moving forward," Emma continued, a knowing smile creeping onto her lips. "Your passion for healthcare is evident. Have you considered pursuing more formal training? Perhaps shifting paths isn't as daunting as it seems." The invitation felt like a door opening, exposing Ella to the sunlight of potential. But what would it mean to step through? Would this truly redefine her life? Or was she again standing on shaky ground? As Ella contemplated the implications, a flicker of excitement ignited within her. Here was an opportunity she hadn't dared to imagine. The question lingered. Would she embrace it, facing the looming uncertainty that accompanied such a choice? Or would she falter, allowing doubt to snatch away this chance for transformation? With Emma's steady gaze upon her, Ella felt the weight of decisions yet to come. The echoes of laughter from the main event now felt like distant memories, replaced by the drumming of her heartbeat, urging her forward into the unknown territories of her aspirations. This critical moment was shaping her destiny, but what would it take to see it through? Ella stood there, feeling the invisible strings of destiny tighten around her as Emma's gaze bore into her. The challenge ahead was substantial, more than just securing an internship. It was a complete transformation of her self-image, a pivot away from the confines of her current existence. She could either mold her future or keep her head down as she always had. "What do you think?" Emma prodded gently, breaking through Ella's reverie. Ella's mind raced. Could she withstand this shift? More importantly, could she excel in a world she had so long kept at bay? She envisioned herself in the clinic, nurturing, learning, making a real impact. Yet, the image was clouded with self-doubt. Flickers of her past failures flashed before her. Low grades in high school when she lacked the support and guidance. The feeling of always being less than in situations like these. I want to," Ella confessed, her voice betraying a tremor. "But what if I don't belong there? I can't shake the feeling that this is just a dream." Emma stepped closer, a quiet intensity in her demeanor. "Belonging isn't given. It's created. You have to go out and claim it, even if it feels uncomfortable at first." The weight of those words settled into Ella's consciousness. Creating her path, what would it take to truly believe she could? Inspiration surged as she remembered speaking up to Mr. Harrison and how empowering that felt. Adrenaline coursed through her veins again, reminding her that she had already taken a step. Would it matter if she faltered? Every successful person had doubts. "Okay," Ella finally said, her voice steadier now. "Let us set a plan. I'll apply for the internship." Emma's eyes brightened. "That's fantastic. I'll help you with the application. We can even practice for the interview together." A rush of relief flooded through Ella. It felt like the first brush of sunlight after a long winter. This challenge would not just be hers alone. She had support. Yet, as she reveled in this newfound determination, another wave of fear crashed over her, a fear of the unknown. How would Mr. Harrison react if he discovered her ambition? Would the family stand in her way? The questions piled up in her mind, each one louder than the last. What if they saw her as a threat? Risk was inherent in every change, but she couldn't let that derail her. "I'll do it, Emma," she repeated, her voice firm. "I want this." Emma nodded, pride radiating from her. "You already have what it takes to make a difference. Trust that." With every supportive word, Ella began to chart a more distinct path in her mind. They discussed application deadlines, tailored her resume to reflect not just her skills but also her vision. The details of the process transformed into building blocks, each setting her further away from the trepidation that had gripped her earlier. Days turned into a blur as she penned her application, pouring her heart into every word. The more she wrote, the more she uncovered hidden abilities, her knack for empathy, her hunger for knowledge, and perhaps a courage she never acknowledged. This wasn't just a chance to leave her job. It was a declaration of who she was meant to be. Finally, the moment of submission approached, the realization hitting her like a tidal wave. This was it, a pivotal point. But did she really have the courage to see it through? What if the internship opened doors but also exposed her vulnerability? Ella felt akin to a juggler balancing fragile glass objects. All it took was one misstep, and everything could shatter. As the deadline loomed, Ella hesitated at the computer, finger hovering over the submit button. Deep breaths filled her lungs as she thought of the lives she could change. The suspense wrapped around her like a vice, amplifying that singular moment of choice. Would she leap into the unknown and embrace her potential? Or would she hold back, caging herself in fear? In that delicate heartbeat of time, she realized something monumental. This decision, unlike any before, was solely hers. At that moment, the drumming of her heart transformed into a battle cry for her evolution, a challenge she couldn't afford to back down from. She hit submit, setting in motion a chain of events that would ultimately test her resolve. As she gazed at the screen, she caught a glimpse of a future she had only just begun to grasp. But before she could fully celebrate, a sudden message notification popped up. It was from the clinic, an invitation for an immediate interview. The stakes just rose. Would she be ready to meet them head-on? Ella settled into her worn desk chair, her heart racing, and thoughts swirling like a tempest in a glass ball. The email notification's urgency spurred a mix of excitement and dread. An interview at the clinic. An opportunity that felt surreal, yet electrifying. But could she walk into that space and present her true self? Or would she default to the familiar shadows of inadequacy? Determined not to let panic grip her once more, she grabbed a notebook and flipped to a fresh page, scrawling in uneven letters, interview prep. She categorized her thoughts like stones along a path. Research the clinic, prepare answers, anticipate questions, and most crucially understand her worth, not just to appeal to the interviewers, but to solidify her own resolve. Days devolved into a whirlwind of scouring the clinic's history, patient testimonials, and the professionals she might meet. With each click, each revelation, she unearthed pieces of herself. Ella recognized that her empathy would lend itself well to the role, a far cry from her existing life of monotony and unfulfilling tasks. She began constructing her narrative, breathing life into her skills and experiences, not just as a series of bullet points on a page, but as a story that reflected her journey toward this very moment. Yet, as the interview day approached, an ominous cloud of self-doubt loomed on the horizon. The familiar whisper of resentment from her upbringing beckoned, reminding her of past failures, moments of perceived weakness. What if they see through me? What if they know I don't fit? The silence of her bedroom felt both like a cocoon and a prison. Enough, she whispered to herself, rousing the stirrings of determination buried deep within. Those voices were echoing old fears, not the truths that lay ahead. She envisioned herself seated across from the interview panel, responding with clarity, not just to their questions but to her own soul, the courage to say, "I belong here." Each breath she took existed as a defiance against doubt. Emma's unwavering belief became her anchor as the day of reckoning arrived. They practiced together, taking turns playing the roles of interviewers and candidates, building Ella's confidence amidst laughter and constructive critiques. But the real test lay ahead. On the day of her interview, Ella chose her attire with intention, sporting a blazer that felt less like a costume and more like armor. As she stood in front of the mirror, she rehearsed her opening lines, reflecting not just her technical skills, but her heart. When she arrived at the clinic, it felt as though she walked into a different world, a world she was ready to inhabit. Bright lights glimmered overhead, and the air hummed with the scent of antiseptic mingling with hope. Every step toward the interview room consisted of an internal tug of war. Excitement battled with terror. The receptionist greeted her with a warm smile that washed over her like reassurance. Finally, she was called in. Facing the interviewers, Ella took a deep breath and let her vision crystallize. Rather than striving for perfection, she committed to authenticity, sharing her journey, her motivations, and her desire to learn and grow. For the first time, her past felt less like a burden and more like a tapestry, rich with colors of every experience that had shaped her. As the questions flowed, she noted their focus on cultural fit, on empathy, on the human connection she had always valued. Each answer became an affirmation. The weight of the glass objects she had been precariously balancing shifted and felt lighter. She realized that they weren't just screening her for a position, they were searching for someone who could contribute meaningfully to their team. But as the interview wound down, a final question brought her to a crossroads. What do you consider your greatest weakness? The inquiries until now had allowed her to showcase her best. This question, however, pressed into her core. The pause felt like eternity. Was she prepared to expose that very vulnerability she had once hidden so deeply? The hesitation lingered in the air, and she felt the urge to retreat behind a veil of displayable confidence. Yet something different happened. She chose honesty. My greatest weakness is my fear of not belonging. It often holds me back, but I believe facing that fear has prepared me for this moment. I want to learn to prove I can thrive regardless of where I started. The truth hung in the air, hovering alongside the fast-beating hearts in the room. The interviewers exchanged glances, the shift palpable. Had she just stepped through a threshold that left the conventional responses behind? As she concluded and exited the interview, the reality of what she had just done began to settle in. She took a moment to breathe, reflecting on the weight she had shed and the ground she had gained. Regardless of the outcome, she had confronted a part of herself that previously loomed large and daunting. Still, there was no room for complacency. Closing her eyes momentarily, Ella pondered whether this newfound sense of self was enough to withstand the scrutiny of her family. What awaited her when she returned home? Would Mr. Harrison embrace her ambition, or would he dismiss her efforts? The thought burned at the edges of her mind, foreshadowing a confrontation that might redefine her journey all over again. She braced herself, realizing that with each step forward came new challenges, revealing her journey as one sculpted not just by aspiration but by struggle. And at that moment she knew she would face them one way or another. Ella stepped inside her home, anticipation mixed with a flutter of dread. The familiar surroundings felt different now, as if she had crossed an invisible threshold into a new chapter of her life. The walls, cluttered with family photos and reminders of a simpler past, echoed with the weight of expectations. Mr. Harrison, her father, lounged in his armchair, the newspaper spread across his lap. He looked up as Ella entered, scanning her attire, the blazer still providing a semblance of her confidence. She took a breath, steadying herself against the wave of judgment she anticipated. Would he see the change in her, or would he cling to the old notions of who she was, the version defined by her insecurities? "Hey, you're looking sharp there," he remarked, a hint of skepticism lacing his tone. "Thanks, Dad. I had an interview," she said, her voice carrying a mixture of enthusiasm and apprehension. His expression shifted slightly. "How'd it go?" "Good, I think. I was honest about my weaknesses," she replied, careful with her words. Honesty wasn't something that had come easily in their household. Mr. Harrison's brow furrowed. "Honesty? About what?" "You know that businesses want strong candidates, not someone who doubts themselves. You've got to put your best foot forward." Her heart sank a little. The critique stung, digging into the tender place where her newfound confidence had begun to blossom. But rather than retreating, she felt the quiet force of her resolve rise. "Dad, I faced a fear today. I didn't just list my strengths. I talked about my struggles. It felt right to be authentic for once." He shifted in his seat, that familiar tension rising in the air between them. Ella could almost hear the clock ticking loudly, each second swelling with the anticipation of his response. "I didn't raise you to showcase your vulnerabilities, Ella," he said firmly. "In this world it's about strength." "Strength isn't just about concealing my struggles," she challenged. "It's about embracing them. I've always been afraid of being less than your idea of perfect. But maybe my true strength lies in being myself." The silence that followed pressed heavily upon them. Ella didn't know if she had won this round, but she felt empowered for having stood her ground. This afternoon she'd remain true to her journey, unearthing layers of herself previously hidden away. Their exchange lingered in the back of her mind, gnawing at her thoughts as she moved through the evening routine. Each moment felt like choreography. The clinking of dishes in the sink as she washed while contemplating her father's words. The dull thud of her heart against her ribcage, racing not from anxiety but from a new sense of purpose. After dinner she sat down at her desk again, the notebook waiting expectantly. This time, however, the preparation felt different. Instead of merely honing skills for the clinic's job, she sought to explore broader ambitions. The interview had been a small victory, but it ignited a longing for more understanding of her potential, more paths to discover. She began jotting ideas, weaving them into different scenarios. Attending workshops, volunteering to grasp practical experiences, expanding her network within the medical community. Every idea fueled her resolve. She wanted not just a job but to carve a meaningful place for herself, to unearth the latent talents she often disregarded. But the possibility of rejection flickered in her mind's periphery. What if none of this was enough? The creeping doubt returned, this time intertwined with a fierce desire to challenge it. Ella made a mental note to confront those fears not only when they appeared in the form of Mr. Harrison's disapproval, but in every facet of her life. The page filled slowly, her thoughts transforming into a manifesto of commitments to herself. And as the words spilled onto the paper, a realization crystallized within her. She would not allow fear to suppress her aspirations anymore. She would instead allow her ambitions to redefine her relationship with those fears. A sudden rush of inspiration surged through her. She flipped the page to a fresh start and scrawled, "Discovering my worth." Each word marked a pledge to herself, a reminder that striving for authenticity was paramount. But where to begin? How to turn dreams into reality when faced with the shadows of her upbringing? The questions loomed as she penned a list of possible steps to take, each one promising new challenges and revelations. Just as she reached the end of her list, the phone buzzed. Ella's heart raced. It was a message inviting her to a networking event within the medical community. Was this the opportunity she had been seeking? She stared at the screen, uncertain. Was she ready to step further into this new world? The moment of truth was upon her. Did she dare to take the plunge? Ella hesitated, knowing full well that this decision could shape her journey significantly. Would she accept the invitation and risk stepping out of the familiar shadows, or would she stay rooted in safety? With the tension swirling in her chest, she felt the pull of determination battling against fear, leaving her at the edge of a precipice. Ella tapped her fingers against the desk, the metal of her laptop cool beneath her touch as the invitation blinked on the screen. The words glared at her, a beacon of possibility mixed with the anxiety she felt. A networking event, the proverbial doorway to connections and opportunities that could propel her career forward. But what if she fumbled? What if the same fears of inadequacy that had haunted her for years resurfaced in a public space? She took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs, steadying her racing heart. Overwhelmed by uncertainty, Ella grabbed her notebook and began to sketch out strategies. Networking was an entirely new landscape for her, but it was also a chance to shift her narrative. If she approached it as a means to connect, rather than a performance to pass or fail, perhaps it wouldn't feel so daunting. Make a list of potential discussion topics, she murmured to herself, grabbing a bright green pen. She jotted down ideas. Her passions in the medical field, current trends in patient care, the evolving role of technology in healthcare. Instead of merely trading business cards, she imagined herself engaging in conversations, exchanging insights. With each word, a warmth spread through her, fueling her determination to escape the cages of her self-doubt. This is about growth, she reminded herself, flipping back through her notes filled with aspirations. This is about claiming my space. Glancing at the clock, She noted how quickly time was ticking away toward the event. A rush of adrenaline coursed through her, battling against the remnants of anxiety. Would Mr. Harrison approve? That thought popped into her head uninvited, but she quickly pushed it aside. This wasn't about his expectations. It was about her journey. An urge sparked within her to dress in something that reflected her confidence. A wardrobe that would shout she was ready to step into the world on her own terms. She rummaged through her closet, selecting an outfit that felt both professional and true to her personal style. As she slid into the blazer and straightened her hair, she couldn't help but glance in the mirror. For the first time, she didn't just see the reflection of someone trying to meet standards. She saw a woman prepared to carve out her identity. When she finally stepped out into the softly lit evening, the golden glow from the street lamps surrounded her like a promise. The venue hummed with excitement, and as she entered, the buzz of conversation enveloped her. A knot formed in her stomach as her gaze swept across a multitude of faces. Everyone seemed effortlessly confident, engaged in discussions that flowed like a well-rehearsed dance. Yet, as the initial wave of anxiety washed over her, she remembered her note, "Discovering my worth." The mantra became a guiding star, pulling her towards the hope of connection. She took small steps, positioning herself near groups exchanging stories and laughter. It wasn't just about networking for career purposes. It was about sharing experiences and learning from one another. Minutes passed, and with each interaction, however small, Ella felt the pulse of her ambition thrumming stronger. She approached a small cluster of professionals discussing rising health technologies. Summoning her courage, she wove herself into their conversation. "What do you think about integrating artificial intelligence in patient diagnostics?" she asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The response was instantaneous. They welcomed her curiosity and invited her into a dialogue. The exchange unfolded organically, and with every contribution Ella made, she felt layers of her old self begin to shed. Here was a realm where vulnerability could act as a launchpad for authentic connections. Instead of fearing judgment, she embraced every moment as a step into her future. As the evening progressed, a remarkable realization dawned upon Ella. She was not just participating. She belonged. Each conversation was a thread woven into the fabric of her professional development, contributing to the tapestry of her identity in this new territory. But just as Ella began to grasp the depth of her emerging confidence, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was a reminder of the upcoming deadline for submissions to an important medical conference, where she'd been contemplating showcasing her unique perspective. Suddenly, she faced a new challenge. Could she capture this momentum and translate it into tangible outcomes? Doubt flickered once again, a weight threatening to pull her back. Was it too soon? Was she exploring too much without solid footing? In that moment, caught between the thrill of new possibilities and the shadows of her old hesitations, she realized the true test lay not in the external perceptions of others, but in her willingness to confront the obstacles within herself. Determined to push past her self-imposed limits, she took a deep breath, her pulse quickening. Ella's decision to pursue the conference submission could entirely redefine her professional journey. Would she take this leap into new and uncertain waters? Or would she let the fear of rejection dictate her path once more? Her heart raced, knowing the significance of this moment. Would her aspirations take flight? Or would she allow the past to tether her back? The soft hum of the city fell against Ella's ears as she stepped out of the vibrant atmosphere of the networking event. Each exchange, every shared thought about healthcare advancements, lingered in her mind, a stark contrast to the weighty reminder on her phone. The upcoming conference submission loomed over her like a cloud, a symbol of both opportunity and fear. She returned home that evening with her heart still racing from the high of connection. However, the buzz quickly faded as she sat at her desk, paper and pen sprawled before her, the reality settling in like an unwelcome blanket. The looming deadline felt like a ticking clock, each second amplifying the pressure. What could she possibly present that would validate her presence in a field dominated by seasoned professionals? Thoughts whirled frantically in her mind. What if I fail? What if my ideas aren't good enough? Those questions felt familiar, echoes of past self-doubt returning just when she seemed to have found her footing. She took pauses to breathe, slowly reminding herself of her earlier mantra. Discovering her worth meant pushing against those insecurities, and exploring the depths of her capabilities. She began to write, her hand moving almost of its own accord. Each stroke of the pen fermented ideas, mixing her insights about the rapid evolution in technology with her practical experiences in healthcare. The innovative ways AI could enhance patient care began to take shape on the paper, and Ella felt a flicker of excitement ignite within her. The more she wrote, the less daunting the prospect felt. But a jolt of anxiety struck when she envisioned the audience experienced researchers, medical directors. Would they consider her insights valuable? The fear of inadequacy threatened her clarity, blurring her focus and making the words on the page feel futile. Ella paused, her chest tightening, a wave of frustration washing over her. Maybe this wasn't a unique perspective after all. Perhaps she didn't have enough clout to stand among these titans of the industry. Closing her eyes, she took several deep breaths, recollecting the conversations from the networking event. The professional community had felt inclusive. Everyone had welcomed her thoughts with open arms. If she started from her personal experiences and genuine passion, perhaps her perspective could resonate. But it also meant exposing herself to potential criticism. What if she reframed this vulnerability as a strength? The realization landed like a stone in her heart. Ella picked up her pen again, writing about her clinical experiences, specifically instances where she had seen technology make a difference in patient care, would inject authenticity into her submission. After all, her journey was what set her apart. As the hours wore on, ideas flowed into well-structured arguments with supporting examples. The earlier dread slowly morphed into a sense of proficiency. Slowly, she began to see the dawning of something significant, a submission that encapsulated her voice and her journey. But just as she typed the final sentence, uncertainty seeped in once more. It struck at the core of her resolve. What if this wasn't enough? What if she was trying to weave a fabric with threads too thin to hold? With a heavy sigh, Ella glanced at the clock. Midnight had come and gone. Sleep felt like a distant thought. She was on the precipice of self-revelation, yet the fear of rejection had mastered her thoughts again. Perhaps sharing this submission with a trusted mentor for feedback could strengthen her resolve. The thought ignited new energy. It was both practical and empowering. As the resolution settled within her, Ella felt the thrill of a decision made, a step towards her goal emerging through the fog of doubt. In the exhilaration of taking control, she sent a quick message to Mr. Harrison. Her heart raced not from fear but from a sense of purpose. A sudden electric thrill tingled in her fingers as she pressed send, the weight lifting just a little, the buzz of possibility again igniting her core. But as she looked down at the screen, another thought pricked her mind. Did she truly have what it takes to stand up there and present? The stakes grew higher. This was not just a submission, it was a chance to redefine Ella in a professional arena where she had long felt invisible. The moment hung in the air, tension crackling with every beat of her heart. Would the feedback elevate her thoughts and provide the clarity she craved? Or would it thrust her into yet another spiral of anxiety? The clock would continue ticking, and soon the answer would arrive. Anxiety intertwined with anticipation as Ella paced her small apartment, the dim light reflecting the turmoil within her. Questions circled like vultures in her mind. Would Mr. Harrison find her ideas worthy? Was her brave decision to share a glimpse of herself enough to sway someone so seasoned? Uncertainty hardened into resolve. She could do this. She could take charge of her narrative. The hours since she sent the message felt interminable. Each tick of the clock further amplified her unease. The silence bore down, and with it came the gnawing fear that maybe she was overreaching, trying to assert herself into a world where she was still largely untested. But there was another part of her that pushed back, a voice echoing from the depths of her journey, reminding her that innovation often stemmed from risk. Ella resolved to indulge in a brief distraction, flicking through research papers that paralleled her topic. The allure of industry knowledge brought her focus back on the larger context of her submission. She needed to ground herself in facts and figures, yet she had to retain that personal thread that connected her to the project. Statistics could inform her arguments, but her voice would define them. The two watched each other, like strangers in a room waiting for the other to make a move. The sound of a notification jolted her from her thoughts. It was a message from Mr. Harrison. Ella's pulse quickened as she opened it, an overwhelming mix of hope and dread swelling within her. She read his feedback carefully, savoring every word. dissecting criticism as well as validation. His endorsement ignited a small flame of confidence. He had lauded her personal experiences which, he felt, lent substantial value to her insights. But then came the critique. Perhaps clarify your statements on the long-term impact of AI. It will make your argument even stronger. Ella's stomach sank. That familiar wave of self-doubt attempted to wash over her. While the validation felt comforting, the suggestion struck her as a reminder that her journey was still unfolding. She wasn't yet the polished expert she aspired to be. She forced herself to breathe deeply. Every piece of advice represented a stepping stone rather than a hurdle. Perhaps Mr. Harrison's comments were an opportunity, not a condemnation. The urge to crumble under the weight of inadequacy loomed, but she envisioned herself instead as a sculptor chipping away at stone to reveal the art within. This was more than a presentation. It was a profound exercise in self-discovery. With renewed vigor, she dove back into her work. Ella restructured her submission. She revisited her arguments to juxtapose personal stories with data, the narratives weaving through each section seamlessly. 2 hours passed in a blur, fueled by adrenaline and the desire to bring clarity and passion to her points. Each edit felt liberating, invigorating her drive to create something that resonated with authenticity. As she wrapped up the final revisions, Ella glanced at her reflection in the window. The hurried steps of the world outside felt distant and inconsequential compared to the inner growth she experienced. Not just as a professional but as a person. She understood that vulnerability was not a weakness, it was a conduit for connection. Her experiences were valid, her insights mattered. Then, a sudden wave of desire for feedback surged through her, propelling her to send the revised draft back to Mr. Harrison. This time she felt the inward thrill of empowerment, as if she were sending a piece of herself into the world. As the message disappeared into the ether, an unsettling feeling began to curl in her gut once more. Could she withstand another round of vulnerability? The weight felt interminably heavy. Would his next response push her further into confidence, or would it force her to confront her insecurities again? Just when she felt she had reoriented herself, doubt slipped back in, whispering its familiar refrains. Ella's heart thudded at the threshold of her own insecurities, teetering between hope and anxiety once more. This was her moment, not just a presentation, but an assertion of her identity. Suddenly the clock chimed, a reminder that time was an immutable force. What awaited her could either propel her forward or send her spiraling back into the shadows of self-doubt. She felt the electric tension crackle once more, an undeniable pull towards embracing the challenges ahead. But what if the true test was not just the feedback from Mr. Harrison, but how she chose to internalize it, to redefine the narrative that surrounded her being in this industry? Ella's heart pounded as she returned home from the clinic, elated yet exhausted. She had wowed the interviewers and secured her place as an intern, but now she was faced with the reality of her new path. The reflections of her journey loomed large in her mind. Those moments of doubt, the resentment that had once colored her childhood ambition, and the empowering acts of courage that had propelled her forward composed the chapters of a life transformed. The shadow of the Harrisons' grandeur still flickered in her memory, but now it blended into a tapestry of resilience and determination. For the first time, Ella felt she could claim her identity not just as the maid or the underqualified, but as a burgeoning healthcare professional with aspirations to make a difference. Her first day in the clinic was marked by nervous excitement, but as she navigated through administrative tasks and observed the dynamics among the staff, she began to understand the environment she longed to inhabit. The air buzzed with conversations about patient care and innovations in the medical field. It was a world built on camaraderie, and for the first time, she felt like a contributor instead of an outsider peeking through the glass. Her sense of purpose enveloped her during a workshop on patient advocacy. The facilitator encouraged participants to share their stories, and Ella found herself rising to share her own journey, her struggles and triumphs in breaking through societal prejudices and fighting for her worth. The supportive reactions that followed reinforced her belief that vulnerability was, indeed, a strength, and that authenticity could pave the way for real connections. Weeks flowed into each other as Ella immersed herself in everything the clinic offered. She was no longer the hesitant girl battling internal chaos, but rather a confident professional learning to navigate a new landscape. Her eyes brightened as she gathered knowledge while forging relationships with her colleagues who embraced her contributions. The thrill of discovery electrified her veins, reminding her of the passion she had initially sought in medicine. The day arrived when Ella submitted a proposal detailing the impact of patient-centered technology on care delivery. It was an audacious leap, framing not only her insights but echoing the fears and hopes experienced throughout her journey. As she clicked submit on the online portal, a rush of exhilaration filled the air around her. Suddenly, everything she had been working towards felt real. She had transformed the whispers of doubt into a chorus of affirmation. As feedback poured in, the warmth of recognition flooded through her. Her peers acknowledged her perspective. The encouragement she received felt both monumental and humbling. Constructive critiques became stepping stones to refine her argument, propelling her to think deeper yet again. Elle had not just proposed ideas. She demonstrated a grasp of intricate patient dynamics that turned her initial submission into a beacon of possibility. She had, indeed, transformed what once defined her limits into roles of influence. Months later, Ella stood confidently in front of her peers, presenting her findings at the medical conference she had initially feared. Her heart raced not from anxiety, but from the thrill of sharing her voice with an audience eager to hear her story, a testament to her growth. The applause at the conclusion resonated not just as approval, but as the culmination of her arduous journey from doubt to discernment. With each step she took, Ella was aware of the pride swelling within her. She had achieved what once felt impossible. As she stood before that audience, a full-circle moment ignited her purpose. Her confidence mirrored the light she had chased in the Harrisons' home, no longer dimmed by the weight of judgment. This was not merely about personal triumph. It was about carving a path for those who came behind her, for anyone who had ever doubted their potential. Ella had become more than a voice. She had emerged as a beacon for change, representation of resilience and authenticity that society so desperately needed. The journey was never about specific accolades. It had always been about confronting her narrative and reshaping the definitions placed upon her. She was no longer the invisible maid. She had achieved her goal as a recognized healthcare advocate, striving to make a difference in lives that echoed her own. To everyone out there, this is the moment to take that leap, to strive for your dreams, and to embrace your story. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, showing the world the power of personal transformation. Comment below your reactions and theories about Ella's journey. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to support the message of overcoming and authenticity, now more than ever.